And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025. And we are in another very active weather pattern, first that is impacting the west side of the state, especially from the Aleutians up into the west coast and some areas of the interior. We have one area of low pressure in the western Gulf that by Thursday morning will be located around the Gulf of Anadyr. So there's already been moisture pulled along the west coast and inland. And then we have another low, not an especially deep low, but it has a lot of moisture and an impressive wind field that's out ahead of it, like the last two systems over the past couple of weekends. These are strong systems in that regard, even though the central pressure is not all that deep. But looking at what we have here, we expect some IFR conditions along the intercoastal mountains of the Gulf and inner channels of the Panhandle, areas of the Alaska Range, the Yukon Delta, St. Lawrence Island, up along the south slopes of the Brooks Range into the west part there of the North Slope for Thursday afternoon. Still areas along the south slopes of the Brooks Range anticipating IFR conditions, meaning lower ceilings and visibility, some lingering precipitation. Areas here of the inner channels of the like the coastal mountains that you get up against British Columbia and then along the northeastern Gulf Coast back through the YK Delta's southwest interior into the central Aleutians. So we're going to see here on Thursday another low coming up out of the North Pacific across the central Aleutians. That low is going to take a track that is heading northeastward, and as more moisture streams northward up along the west side of the state, IFR conditions expand for Friday morning from the Brooks Range, the middle lower Yukon areas of the Chukchi Sea down south of the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence, Nunavik Island, the Pacific side of the Alaska Range. And then by Friday afternoon, as this wind field increases northward, and also we find that we have just more moist air, warmer, moist air coming northward. It's looking like Anchorage area could get a pretty significant rain event this weekend if the models some models try to keep it snow, but just given the pattern we're in, it's looking at rather significant rainfall, maybe 1 or 2 inches of rain, which would be quite significant for this time of year. Areas along the Brooks Range, we have IFR conditions, the Alaska Range areas of the southwest interior along especially the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula. And then, again, we are looking at conditions here to become stormier, and also the progress. The storm track will eventually reset up coming out of the North Pacific into the Gulf here late this weekend, and especially as we get into next week. So Anaktuvuk Pass to start out for Thursday. IFR conditions there, the Brooks Range, especially the south slopes. Adigan Pass IFR. West arm of the Alaska Range, we are looking at IFR conditions at Lake Clark and Merrill. Rainy Pass IFR, there may be a brief interval of MVFR during the daytime Thursday. Otherwise, Windy Pass should stay IFR. And a little further east, Isabel Pass IFR with maybe a brief interval of MVFR conditions. Farther east, the air is dry enough, generally VFR conditions, Mentasta Pass there as you get toward the Elcan border. Dropping down across the Copper River Basin, moisture will be increasing from the south and west. Tanita Pass, MVFR becoming IFR. And then Portage Pass right now looks like it'll start out IFR in the morning on Thursday and things lift enough to MVFR, but we'll see if that actually happens. Certainly further along in the weekend, the IFR conditions will be more prevalent. Chilkoot and White also looking to hold on to IFR conditions Thursday. There's a slight chance you get a brief interval of MVFR, especially west of those passes, but that's not a given. And looking at the freezing levels aloft, we have two areas where we find higher freezing levels, milder air. One of them is down toward Vancouver Island, offshore there in the North Pacific, 6,000 to 8,000 feet, the freezing levels aloft. And we find back here toward the south and west in the North Pacific, south of the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula, freezing levels rise up to 4,000 and 6,000 feet. And that's the beginning of a push of milder air that will work its way northeastward with time as we go through this weekend. So these freezing levels aloft will further increase, signaling a very mild and moist air mass. We've already have freezing line here for the surface pushed up into the southwest mainland. So these areas likely see temperatures remain above freezing at nighttime. And then here Thursday, Broad area of moderate icing potential within any clouds that are producing precipitation or thicker cloud cover, even if they're not producing that much in the way of precipitation. But in the far north, the Brooks Range slope here, maybe the Seward Peninsula above 3,000 feet. As you get down here over the southwest, inland of, say, Bristol Bay, Kuskokwim Bay above 4,000 feet. Areas along the Gulf Coast above 6,000 feet, extending out there down through the Alaska Peninsula. And then as we get into the eastern central Aleutians, as that stream of warmer, moist air heads northeastward above 8,000 feet there. Very strong jet core at 30,000 feet, 165 knot southwesterly jet core just off of the southwest mainland near Nunavik Island. This is an anticyclonically curved jet core because it's have high pressure in the upper levels of the atmosphere, so it's curved in that direction versus when you have a trough and it's more like this over here. Now, bringing this down to 9,000 feet, this is an even stronger wind field. This is one of the strongest ones I've seen. Over 100, upwards around 100 knots coming into Bristol Bay back toward the eastern Aleutians. That's impressive for mid-levels at 700 millibars, 9,000 feet. And then we bring it down to 3,000 feet, a broad belt of winds that are in excess of 50 to 75 knots over the southeast Bering back through the eastern Aleutians. This is stronger than the wind field that brought the high winds to that windstorm to Anchorage a couple of weekends ago. So not to say that's going to repeat because this is a little different. We're going to have the southwest flow coming up in through Cook Inlet. But nevertheless, on Thursday, we expect severe turbulence areas of the southwest coast, especially, say, Nunavik Island, down along areas of Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay, and then trailing out along the Alaska Peninsula through any of the gaps around any of the ridge lines back here through the eastern and back toward the central Aleutians. And where this frontal system is pushing upwards, there could be low-level wind shear in areas here of the southwest, surface to 4,000 feet. As we trail out along the Alaska Peninsula, again, potential for severe turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet. And then the inklings, as this advances more north and northeastward, we're going to start to see some moderate turbulence in areas of the Gulf, surface to 6,000 feet on Thursday. So definitely stay tuned to later forecast as we are entering a stormy period here later this week that'll continue into next week.